one of the things that I've learned is how important networking really is, and making sure that you know who you need to talk to get to where you need to go. And it sounds like yours is a perfect example of that.
And I think these days, because of technology, it's so easy and everything is so much more connected. Uh, and now that I said that, I didn't even have a cell phone back then. So,
Right, right, right.
it is something that we can take for granted, and that's something I try to help my students.
Luciana, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today and for talking with us.
Happy to be here with you.
So let's start with 2020. I often start with a dancer's background, but I want to start with 2020 because I think we're all sort of still feeling the effects of what we experienced collectively, and the results of that are still sort of manifesting throughout the industry. I know for us at the time, we kept pushing deadlines back and trying to like roll the ball a little bit further down the field to try to hope for performance in that spring of 2020, and obviously came to a point that we couldn't do that anymore. What was that all like for you in the professional world? How did you all find out? And then once you did, what was sort of the reaction throughout the company?
We actually had just come back from California. We were premiering Love and Rage, the last ballet Alexei Radmansky had choreographed for the company. And that was beginning of March. So we were kind of like already traveling in the midst of it, in denial, because we were already hearing things here and there. And then a week after that, we were told that no one was allowed, that a couple of people in the company had gotten COVID on tour. So at the beginning, it was like, oh, this is just going to be like a month or so, like that's what I was trying to believe and hoping for. And then all of a sudden it hit us that this was going to be longer than what we wanted, which was very scary. Of course, I have a family. My husband is also a dancer. So already that involved a lot of not working, even from home. So it was very scary. We have a toddler. He was 2 at the time. So at least we weren't paying for school yet. But it was really, really scary. For me, not so much from a professional point of view, because I danced my whole life, and I was just coming back after having my son. So, and I was actually feeling like back to myself, body wise, and in terms of like after giving birth and what that changes in your body. I was like getting at that good point. So I was like, oh my God, no, no, I don't want to stop now.
Right.
But then we were lucky enough that we started teaching from home very soon, right at the beginning. And that's how we stay in shape somehow, because I was very depressed. The company offered some classes right at the beginning of everything. But it was very depressing for me. It wasn't helping at all. Like I will do bar and a bit of center, I'll be like, oh my God, this is awful. But somehow teaching and having the distraction of helping someone or a group of people on the other side of the computer was very rewarding, especially at that time. If I was feeling that way, the thought of a teenager like waiting for auditions, and it was unthinkable for me.
Right.
So that's how we went through it, you know, as a family, as dancers. Not fun. Not fun, but also having the distraction of the family made everything easier in a way.
Right, right. What were some of the things that you did to stay motivated once we were in it for a few months and obviously classes were all online and you're dancing from home? Obviously, you said teaching helped. What were some of the ways that you stayed motivated, kept yourself moving forward, and in particular, kept your body prepared physically for returning to dance?
I think it was mostly teaching. Also, my husband and I, and a dear friend of mine and colleague at ABT, we created dance company, which was a 3-week summer intensive on Zoom. That was very fulfilling. We had people from Argentina, from Brazil, from United States, some people from Europe. So it was based in California because most of our students were there. So it was like, it was Tetris trying to organize that.
Right.
But having that aspect of, you know, I'm moving, I'm doing bar every day, but I'm doing it because I'm passing my knowledge and I'm helping young dancers in this horrible time with not even knowing what's going to happen and when. So I think that was the main, artistically, that was the main help that I felt. And then we had to move twice during the pandemic.
Oh, wow.
Because we were trying to cut, you know, like whatever we were paying, because we didn't know what was going to happen. So that was also very distracting. And both my husband and I enjoyed design so much. So anything we had and some extra paint and ordering some stuff here and there, but nothing major or too expensive. We created 2 homes, very different 2 homes. And that was also an awakening, to the point that at one point I was like, well, if this is so long that I can go back because of my body, or maybe this is something else on the side that I can experience. And it was not only enjoyable to do, but also it felt like, okay, there are other things, you know, like it's not just this. You've done this your whole life. If you have to change, then there's so many things. So that was
sort of a process of acceptance of the possibility. Yeah. So it's interesting you mentioned teaching. I know it was similar for me in a lot of ways, and I noticed, I'm curious if you had the same experience. We had a few students in particular, and many obviously were struggling to stay motivated and to keep moving, and some dancers, left, stopped taking class, and that's understandable. But we also had a few that went completely the other way, and I mean, took full advantage of the time that they had and really dedicated themselves to getting better, and came back into the studio just really at the next level. And I'm curious if you found that also with any of your students.
definitely, yes. Yeah, there was this this commitment that I felt it myself as a teacher, but I saw it in them, which was, I'm sure you know this, so inspiring. And
Yes.
yeah, there was such a shift, like I guess for them not having had the opportunity to be in a studio and work and get better and learn. Even if you do it at home, there is that aspect that it's so magical when we enter a studio, no matter which studio, that when you miss that, it even happened to me after 30 years of career, like when you don't have that and then you go back. I was shaking the first day back at ABT. I was so emotional just to see my friends and my colleagues, and I definitely saw that in my students, that pride in where they were standing even more than before. And I think it's that lack of, like, no, you can't do that. You can't go to the studio. Even in the worst days, like it happens to me now too. I'm like, oh, I'm going to the studio. That's perfect,
Mm.
So it was just really inspiring to witness that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so let's actually jump back. Um, Tell us about growing up in Argentina, training in Argentina. How did your training then compare to what you experienced once you got to the U.S. And now you're teaching? How did your training compare to your teaching environment now?
Interesting question. Well, when I started in Argentina, I'm the only person in my family that dances. My mom and my dad are very coordinated. My mom is a beautiful dancer herself, but I'm the only one, and they had no idea what ballet was. I mean, they knew ballet existed, but what it took for me to go to ballet school at the Colón Theater, they were like
Mm.
so lost. So they learned with me on the way. I was so lucky. Wait, let me go back. I was an annoying child that would not stop moving. So my parents didn't know what to do with me most of the time. So I swam, I played tennis, I played basketball, among other things. And then right before ballet, I did gymnastics, which I loved. Love, love, love. By that time, I was 5 or 6. So the teacher calls my parents to ask them if I could join the team for competitions. And they asked me, and I was like, yeah, like, and I had that like competing drive already. And then, we're all together, the full team, one of the first days, and I see the older um, competitors. And this beautiful woman had these big legs, and, it's horrible. But I was like, I went to the teacher and I asked the teacher if I was going to have my legs were going to turn into that. Horrible. Keep in mind, my mom is like this beautiful, skinny woman, and that's all
Uh-huh.
we went home. So um, she gives me this whole explanation. You're going to jump very high and you're going to be flying. So, and all I heard was blah, 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 blah. And then I went back home and I told my parents I didn't want to go back. So, long story short, there is this school event that some of us had to learn a choreography and dance. And apparently I was really quick at picking it up. And then I was really shy. But then when I was dancing, I was this like crazy maniac who was like so like unaware of anything else. So they tell my parents about that experience, and they recommend this neighborhood studio. It was actually a conservatory that had music and singing and dance. And I was lucky enough that the person teaching ballet was this woman who had been in the corps de ballet at the Cologne Theater Company in the best days of the company. So she took me under her wing, and I stayed with her for 2 years. And then after that, she asked my parents if she could present me to do the auditions for the school at the Cologne Theater. And then again, they were like, sure, why not? So at this point, I was 9, and I go through 3 different auditions. One, it's a physical, it's like the Russian way, like the real ballet school. And then I get into the school, I start, and for me, I just like going and playing. I mean, I was spending the mornings dancing. I didn't have very good grades at the beginning of the first year. And then when that year ended, they gave me a special mention because of my grades going and like how quick I improved. And it was when I got that mention that I was like, oh, I'm good at this. Can you imagine? I was only 10, and I had that, and that's when I knew what I wanted to do. So throughout my school at the Cologne Theater, which I didn't finish because I started dancing professionally very soon. I was 14. I just had this drive and this, like it was my passion. There was no doubt about it. And it was tough at times because, I will go to ballet school, and then we used to have like classes, particularly outside of the Cologne. So we had this like amazing teachers. So my whole ballet education was insane. The level of teachers I had. And going back to what we were talking about, just stepping into a studio, I will go to the Cologne every morning and get up those like marble stairs, and it was just like the whole experience was. I go back and I hope my son can live something like that. Something, it was just, and I remember feeling this pride, like just going up those stairs. And then you were able to peek if you heard music around the theater. You could peek, and you will just hear like this fantastic opera singers or the orchestra, or watch the company rehearse. It was just like amazing. It was really amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So your professional career started obviously when you were quite young. What was that like at your age and with friends and even family? Like how did that all come about?
Yeah. So I think how you heard people say, oh my God, you're missing so much because you're dancing, and I never felt that way. I never, like weekends, even when I was doing Nutcracker with the main company as a teenager, I was like, oh, this is great. And then I will go back home and join whatever was happening. I never felt that way. I lived it as such a plus, It was hard for me right when I started doing apprenticeship with the company in Argentina, because I had just started high school, and it was like impossible. Like in less than a month, I had been absent like 25 times between getting there late. So we reached the point that, my parents were like, you need to choose something, because I was sleeping 5 hours in order to be able to do homework and more homework and rehearse. And it was just like too much. But I didn't want to do it because I felt very complete. Like, when you're a teenager, you start like being seen and, like liking people like you. So it was like I was feeling as a whole person, not just this little ballerina that also went to school. I had that whole surrounding, but it was impossible. So I chose ballet, and I was lucky enough that my parents gave me the option to start with, of course. So then it was just very organic at the same time. You know, it was long hours, performances will go until midnight sometimes. And that transition was a bit hard for me, not having the structure of school outside of ballet. It took me a while. But then 6 months later, I joined Ballet Argentino, Julio Boca. And I was 15 then, and we were traveling. We will go on tour for a month and a half. And I always tell this story that I hated not going to high school. But then my second tour was to Greece. So there I am standing at the Parthenon, you know, and I have this image of me reading the book in high school. And I was like, oh, so this isn't so bad. Like, if this is going to happen instead. And, you know, when you travel, you learn so much. You are exposed to so much. And I guess that's a chapter that I almost went back during the pandemic to study, but then it was too expensive for us. At the time, like any more expenses were like a horror movie.
Yeah.
So it might happen. It might happen later. Yeah.
So you mentioned that your parents were backing you through all of this. I want to touch on that because it's one of the more difficult parts of teaching, and I would say for us running a school, is getting dancers' parents on board to back them, and obviously it's a heavy financial commitment and a heavy time commitment, and it not just inconveniences one or two people, it inconveniences the whole family in a lot of ways, and getting parents on board is difficult, but absolutely necessary for their dancer to succeed. So tell us a little bit about, I guess, why they backed you the way that they did, especially considering all of those factors that had to go into it.
I think they felt safe doing so because all of my teachers kept telling them that I was going to become a professional ballerina. You know, and everything that kept happening throughout my school years and when I started dancing, everything was showing that it was very possible for me to have a successful career, which started, you know, when I was 15, so early, and I was dancing with Julio Boca, who was this like big star. So I guess they just took the chance, but they trusted me as well. And they trusted my teachers and mentors. And I had really wonderful ones. I'm also very thankful for that. But I guess there's a risk, you know, they took the risk with me, and I feel like they never stopped doing that. As parents, we always do that, you know, and I hope I'm brave enough with my son as they were in the future. And because I couldn't have done it without their support, you know, like it is as for my personality and my type of like family driven personality, I wouldn't have, if they thought that this wasn't a good idea, probably wouldn't have done it at all, you know?
Right.
So I can't imagine what you go through with parents. It's like, it's crazy.
And it's, you know, it's difficult to explain.
Of course.
Really, you know, even if you tell parents ahead of time what to expect, once you're living it, it's a completely different thing. And so, yeah, it's that I would say is one of the more difficult parts of training young dancers long term.
Yeah.
is getting the full family support. So then you moved to the U.S. and joined ABT. So tell us how you went from dancing with Julio Boca to moving. Well, I guess moving and then joining ABT. I don't know which came first, but tell us a little bit about how that all happened.
Yeah, well, that transition was also a bit hard. I was starting to see that Julio will, because he will come here and work with ABT and do all the classicals. He will go back home with his company, um, and do all the fun that he didn't get to do here. So, I was 15 years younger than him. So at the time, I needed to do all those classicals. And when I understood that, I spoke with him and I said, "Listen, I'm feeling that I need more. What do you recommend? Just can you guide me?" Of course, he wasn't very happy, but he helped me. And he told me that he thought ABT was a good company to try because it had people from everywhere, because I hadn't been in a school like Royal Ballet School or Paris Opera School. It was very likely that they will take me. So I came, again, with the help of my parents, uh, and I auditioned for ABT and I got in. But I think in the back of my mind, I was always thinking it's only going to be like 3, 4, 5 years the most, and then I will go back. That didn't happen. so, so that transition was hard. It took me a little while. First of all, I didn't spoke any English other than yes, no, thank you, you're welcome, please.
Oh wow, wow.
Yeah, so I will understand a lot because I had studied a little bit prior to coming, but it's never the same when you're immersed in the culture, and like especially New York and how quick everything happens. It was tough, but at the time the company was the Hispanic dancers were like almost 25, so I was very spoiled about that. And it was also a bit hard to not to realize, because I understood that, but I was coming from like doing all the principal roles, and then I joined the corps, and then the corps at the time, they will only put 1 or 2 casts the most to perform. So it took me a couple of months until someone got injured, and then they saw me. So that transition was, okay, now you sit there and watch. So that was hard. And I was 19. So I was like, oh my God, let me dance. I want to dance.
Right.
But again, it took me probably no more than a month to look around and be like, well, this is different. Of course, I'm going to be here, and I will sneak in every rehearsal possible, even if it was just from the little window at the door, and watch everyone. So that was the beginning. And ABT was very different at the time. It had all these like huge stars, and it was just pure glamour. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Did you have anyone once you got here that acted as a guide? I guess I should be asking, how did you get here and navigate the dance world? One of the things that I personally didn't do well, especially post college, was navigate what was going on. It wasn't until a few years after I had stopped training full time that I had started to get a better handle on what was going on, because I was teaching. But at the time, there were a few of us that just sort of felt like we were in the middle of the ocean,
Right.
looking for one fish, and had no idea what to do to find it, So it was, how did you get here and manage that?
That sounds terrifying, by the way.
It was in a lot of ways. It really was.
I bet it was. I guess I had the advantage of not speaking the language in a way, if I can say that. Um,
Hmm.
Robert Hill, who also was a former principal at ABT, had gone to Ballet Argentino to choreograph a piece. And he was actually the one that told me, if you ever go to New York, I can help you. And he was the one that helped me get to the building because I auditioned when they were at the spring and summer season at the Metropolitan Opera House. So you can
Oh, wow.
imagine that already. Just like
Yeah.
I felt like I was 9 again, entering those marble stairs. So he was the one that guided me through that, and then I guess a lot of the Argentinian dancers and Spaniards and Cubans that were in the company guided me a lot. Yes. Yeah.
That's yeah. So it's one of the things that I've learned is how important networking really is, and making sure that you know who you need to talk to get to where you need to go. And it sounds like yours is a perfect example of that.
And I think these days, because of technology, it's so easy and everything is so much more connected. And now that I said that, I didn't even have a cell phone back then. So,
Right. Right. Right.
it is something that we can take for granted, and that's something I try to help my students, the ones that are in that transition of I'm not a student, I'm going to be a trainee somewhere, and because of traveling with Julio and because being at ABT, I have so many connections, like it's sending a message and asking, I have this dancer, what should I do? And,
Mm.
that's just so important. And it was always really hard for me to do it for myself. I'm horrible at that. Till the day, I hate asking favors. But when it's for someone else, I have my desk and I'll just move everything to help,
Mm.
because it's what you said. It's always better if you know someone, not for the person asking, but for the person giving a contract or having someone join their school, whatever it is. It's important. Yeah,
Right.
that's
Right.
also something that I thought about navigating during the pandemic when I thought about possibilities, just like helping young dancers outside of big competitions, and big brands, one-on-one help, like with the
Right.
next step. Yeah.
Right. Right. I want to talk a little bit about your time with ABT, especially those first 10 to 12 years. I've talked to a few others in the past who have had similarly long runs in the core before advancing, and it's a really long time for anyone, but it's a really long time in dance years, in ballet years, because we don't have that many, and so that's a long time, and I'm curious from your experience what that was like. How did you keep yourself motivated? Were you looking for promotion throughout that time, and it just hadn't happened yet, or how did all of that sort of pan out? Because that's, especially for a dancer new to the country and the school, how did all of that happen over 14 years?
Yeah. Well, like you said many times, it felt long. It felt like maybe not the first 10 years, because I understood the dynamic of the company, not because I didn't want it, but I knew it wasn't going to happen like that. Um, because usually those promotions within the company happen if it's someone like very, very, like you can just like see it standing and you're like, yeah, that's a soloist or that's a principal or whatever.
Mm,
And of
right.
course, there are always other factors that affect, the decision of promoting someone or not. The more political side of, what's best for the company, especially these days with racism and, all that stuff. Like, it felt long. It felt like I was ready at least 4 years before it happened, or maybe 5. But I think what kept me going is that I was always given a lot of opportunities to dance. So even though I was in the corps, I was getting to do soloist and principal roles very often, which was really hard for the body. I go back to that and I don't understand how I did it or anyone does it because it's really demanding. And also like not just physically wise, but emotionally, like you go from doing a solo that's given to you because it suits you, and then you feel all that magic. You're not dancing following whoever is in front of you or around you, and you have that autonomy. And then going back to the core, it can be hard. I never had that problem because I understood that I could do both, and that going back to the core wasn't diminishing. It wasn't going to take those chances away from me, for sure. And whoever saw me doing those more feature roles would not forget because I was doing the core, So in a way, even though it felt long, I felt this, it sounds very masochistic, but I felt this pride of like, yeah, I can do both and still feel good about it,
I've hypothesized in the past that part of that is to test who can handle it.
Of course.
And that, is one of those other factors that you mentioned that goes into possible promotion is, can you handle everything we give you? And if we know that if you can handle that, you can definitely handle all of this.
Yeah, that's for sure something that I think it's taught. I'm not sure, but if it's not, I think it's done unconsciously as well, And I think it's important because not everyone is strong enough to go back and forth or just to take everything that takes to be in those more feature roles in a company like ABT,
Right.
I remember I was always given more the character roles or Sinatra suite, like the more artistic and dancier, not necessarily in point shoes. And I remember the first big thing I did quite at the beginning was Juliet France, which was back in the day, only soloist dancers, and I remember feeling like so like prepared and like, this is nothing for me, like almost to a cocky place. and then I'm on stage. It's dark. Juliet is like sleeping, she just had her potion and whatever. And it's just 3 of us and the music is so quiet. And I take the first step. I just do a pique développé, and I felt shaky. And I was like, oh. So that experience was very humbling and eye-opener. And I'm so lucky that I was receptive of what was happening, because I feel like if I hadn't had that experience, I would have been bitter about those roles not given to me, when I thought I was ready, which I obviously wasn't, because when I wasn't even by myself, but the whole weight of the scene, and it was a lot. And I realized that I was nervous. So I was very thankful to have experienced that and thought about it. I was like, oof, okay. okay, maybe this is a good thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, having spent all of that time in the Corps, and obviously you were also, like you said, doing other roles in addition. What do you feel like you took away from that time in the Corps? What is beneficial, in particular, for a dancer to be in the Corps de Ballet for that long? Because I've talked to others who have mentioned specifically that time in the Corps was absolutely crucial for them to be able to grow into the next phase of their let's call it dance journey, for lack of a better way of saying it. What was that like for you? What did you take away from all of that time?
Well, it was definitely crucial. Whoever tells you it's not really seeing the truth of the matter. Like no matter how bad of an experience you have because you're craving more, being in the Corps gives you such a base. If you manage well, like I was in the Corps, but I was always trying to do gigs outside where I will have, that balance for myself. And just to remind myself that I was also able to do that, you know. But I think what I took the most, and I still do, even as a soloist, I was able to be surrounded by incredible artists. And I will always watch, even when I wasn't required in the studio, I will stay longer or arrive earlier, and I will try, even just like listening to corrections like that were given to the principals or soloists. And I've learned so much from watching. And the things that I like and the things that I don't like, like when you see something beautiful or something that you're like, oof, I should not do that. That's also very important. So that's something I was very aware then, and I still see it. That doesn't necessarily mean it's not just for the Corps, but because you're in the Corps, sometimes you're just standing on the side and there's a mirror and you can watch and you can listen to what's being said to them. And I think that shaped a lot my choices as a dancer as well.
So it's interesting you mentioned that. We talked about earlier some of the difficulty we have with parents of dancers. One of the difficulties we have with dancers themselves is emphasizing the importance of just watching as much, like take in as much as you can, because trying to generate the type of, let's call it, movement vocabulary or technical ability just from one teacher a few times a week isn't going to do it. You really need to immerse yourself, like really need to spend hours just watching dancers.
Yeah. Yeah, dancers and dancers being coached. If you have that opportunity, that's something I was so lucky to have. I wasn't.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's not something that it wasn't just amazing dancers and artists that I was able to see. I was able to listen what they were told, and sometimes not be in my count because of it, but it was so worth it.
Right.
Yeah, no, it's so important, and I still do that. I think it's something that I enjoy, no matter how much it helps me or not. I just enjoy the information, and then that's something that I see that I have as a teacher. I love like giving all this information, and I was lucky enough that I had teachers like that. So and not every teacher is very giving, like a lot of people, not because they don't want to, but because they don't have it in them. I always have that curiosity, and I think that's so helpful for young dancers, Yeah.
You mentioned teaching. I want to talk a little bit about your teaching. We talked a little bit about it earlier, but what are some of the things that you really enjoy about teaching and coaching, and what are some of the things that you find to be your strengths as a teacher and coach? You just mentioned paying attention. being open to new things. But what are some of the other things that you find as strengths that you have as a coach?
I think what I have that's really helpful, it's easy for me to give examples, not necessarily in dance itself, but about feelings, about what a step feels like or can feel like. And I think that's so helpful for young dancers or older dancers, because I still do it myself. I still try to go there. But when I coach, I think probably it's hard to say this about myself, but probably my strength is that I'm able to work with whoever I have in the front and see a lot when I watch, maybe because of this exercise that I've been doing kind of naturally because of my curiosity. But when I watch, what tends to happen when I give a correction, it looks 10 times better. So I think it's that I have a good eye. It's hard to put it into words, but it's really enjoyable. I'm sure you have this too when you say, try this. I think this might be better for you. And I think I really enjoy that. Like I can get very personal with whoever I have, even in a group class. And that's really fulfilling when I get to help that much.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And then what are some of the challenges that you feel like you face when you're coaching and teaching, especially young dancers?
The artistic side of dance these days. Dancers these days have all this information and they have this trained bodies, like I used to get in the studio and just dance. And now go to the gym, they have like 3 different stretching devices that they use like for half an hour before. It's amazing. But my constant struggle is, without telling them that's not important, is to try to guide them through. It's okay if you can lift your leg to your ear or the other ear. It's wonderful. How can you make it artistic? By lifting your leg, you can be sensual, you can be angry, you can be sad, you can be scared. You have the power to do that. So I think that's a big challenge we have as teachers. And I also love it. I love like lowering legs and be like, no, it's not where the leg goes, it's how it gets there. Like, what do you want to tell? Even if it's something abstract, there's always something that you are going to express. And you're always going to touch somebody one way or the other. So that's our power as artists. We have that power. And I think that's the most challenging part as a coach or a teacher these days, because everything is so different, like as wonderful as it is that we're having this conversation on Zoom, then like a lot of people like watch a video and they learn something from YouTube or whatever. And they're like, oh, hey, I know it. And they probably do an amazing job, but it's not just that. So that's, I think, the biggest challenge. Yeah.
Yes. Completely agree, by the way. Completely agree. Yeah, it's so difficult. It's so difficult to teach that. It's so difficult. Especially because there's such a, and this is a different conversation, but social media and things, sources like YouTube give us very short-term gratification for learning things. Like you said, you can watch a video and learn it and then you can do it. and that's enough. And it didn't used to be enough, and now it's enough for people. And you know, in some ways, it's obviously been incredibly helpful to the industry as a whole. And you know, we've all advanced in so many new ways because of it. But it's also, in a way, held us back. I would say artistically is a good word, or you could say something like spiritually, or you know, something in that realm where it's the thing that keeps audiences coming back. It's because you can find a dancer who can kick their ear on YouTube. You can watch that on YouTube and it's fine. But the thing that brings audiences into the theater is what's missing. And I completely agree. It's very difficult to teach that if it's not already there. If it's not just, if you don't feel it, how do you teach a person to feel a thing? You know,
Well,
and it's, yeah.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but
Please.
as I'm listening to you, I think another challenge that we have is that maybe it is something that we can teach to everyone. Maybe it's something that we can teach, that artistic side. Maybe it's something that it's seen from someone that has it, but not everyone has it. You can probably get close to it, but not everyone has that artistic side. And that's also something that as teachers and coaches, we have to accept, that you can have someone in front of you that has everything but that.
Wow. Yeah. And in some ways that is almost far more difficult to emotionally as a teacher, because you're pouring so much of yourself into your students, and having to regulate that fact that maybe it's just not there, and you have to sort of figure out what to do with it. Absolutely. I want to talk about your husband, actually, without getting you into any trouble or anything. So Jonathan,
Yes.
Jonathan is also a dancer, and I don't know, is he with a company full time, or does he contract?
Yeah, he was freelancing for the past 3 years, and now he's with New Jersey Ballet Company under Maria Korofsky direction. He's so happy, and he's
Excellent.
also doing Metropolitan Opera ballet. So busy.
Fantastic. Excellent.
Yeah.
Sometimes you do perform together. I was just watching some clips of you two performing together the other day. What's your dynamic, your working relationship like? How does it overlap with your personal relationship, and how do you manage that in the studio and obviously at home? Because there's being someone who also works with his significant other, it's hard to find sometimes the line between where work ends,
Of course.
and personal life begins. So how do you two manage all of that?
For us, it's actually very easy, and I think we don't dance as much as we want. We don't dance together as much as we want. I wonder, maybe that's a factor why it's so easy. I don't think it is. No, we get along really well, and we enjoy dancing a little much, to the point that when we rehearse, we don't get much done, because, oh no, it's okay, it's me. No, you were fine. It's, like, it's almost to the other extreme. It's really special. And that was something that we were hesitant at the beginning, because we never danced together. He was also in Julio's company, but a different time. I was already here. So we never really crossed paths. And at the beginning, we were like, oh, do we really want to go there? Like, I don't know. And then it was really nice. When that happens, then it's very magical, because you know each other so well that it just, like last time we danced together, I think it was for Benicio School for our son. We danced at a restaurant on concrete. It was like the worst conditions ever. But we were happy to do so, of course. And
Right.
we finished with this duet that was created on us. That's beautiful. The music is beautiful, and it talks about us together and before being together. So, and we finished, and we were crying.
Mm.
And to have that closeness on top of our relationship as parents, or as a couple, as professionals, it's something we treasure and we really, really enjoy. Yeah. So it doesn't happen very often, but it's really nice when it does.
It's wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
That is wonderful to hear.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think that's a good place to end. If you didn't have anything else that you wanted to add.
No, I guess just thank you for doing this. I think it's so important for our community to learn about dancers' experiences, and I think that's something very positive that happened during the pandemic. How everything got so connected all of a sudden, and to the young dancers, like, reach out. What we were saying, just reach out. Don't be afraid of asking, and just really go for it, because life is too short. Our career is too short. And yeah, just thank you. Thank you, because this is very important. It really is.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time
My pleasure.
to do this. I mean, yeah, I can only do it if I have people who are willing to talk to me. So thank you. Thank you very, very much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.